Nice to meet you. I'm
Nice to
Kobe.
meet you. Colby, nice to meet you.
So our first question: What was your what year did you move, or were you born in OLB?
I wasn't born in Little Orchard Beach. I was born in a place called Jonesport, Maine. It's about 4 hours or so up the coast in down East Maine. And when I was born, my parents moved to Saco immediately. I never actually lived there. And we lived in we moved to Biddeford and lived in Biddeford for 3 or 4 years, then moved to Saco, and then we moved to Little Orchard Beach in 1960.
Did you have any siblings? If so, do you live in this town still?
I do. I have a sister and I have a brother. My brother Jay lives in Old Orchard Beach. He's on the town council and was a firefighter in Portland and retired from there 5 or 6 years ago.
Where, it's a little weird, where do you live?
Right now,
Yeah.
I live on Garden Street in Old Orchard Beach.
Alright, nice to meet you. I'm Kobe.
Nice to meet you, Colby.
So what year did you move, or were you born in OLB?
I wasn't born in Old Orchard. I was born in Jonesport, Maine, which is about 4 hours up the coast. I was born in 1950, and my parents moved immediately to Biddeford. We lived in Biddeford for a few years, then moved to Saco, and then in 1960 we moved to Old Orchard Beach.
Do you have any siblings? If so, do they still live in town?
I do. I have a brother Jay who lives in town. He's on the town council, and he retired from the Portland Fire Department a few years ago. I have a sister Karen who lives in Westbrook, and they both obviously grew up here as well.
Yeah. Where do you live currently?
I live on Garden Street in Old Orchard Beach.
What was your childhood like? What was your childhood like in OLB?
I enjoyed my childhood growing up in Old Orchard Beach. I think it was a great place to have grown up. We experienced a lot of things here that kids in other communities that don't have the environment we have here, with the seasonal aspect of it, with the tourists and the downtown and all the things that go with that. So as a kid growing up, I enjoyed every bit of that. I spent my life downtown doing a lot of things down there on the beach, and got into surfing when I was 13 years old, and did that a lot, and just really enjoyed being in Old Orchard Beach in that environment.
Childhood experience in OLB?
Probably just having had the opportunity to grow up here in Old Orchard, in the, like I said, with all of the things that Old Orchard had to offer as a child growing up in the 1960s as a young boy. And things were so much different then, and we all look back at the way things were and think how great it was and wish we could go do it again. And the old story about how you had to come home when the street lights were on, and you had to go home for supper, and you didn't have telephones and cell phones and all those kinds of things to distract you, so you found other things to do. So you hung out with all the kids in the neighborhood, and you rode bikes together, and you went to the beach and did those kinds of things. I guess just going to school here, all the things that went with that, in high school playing the sports, and then grammar school, junior high school playing sports, and just the friends that you had and all the good times that you had growing up as a kid. Again, I think because Old Orchard Beach is a little bit different than a lot of communities, you get to experience a different kind of childhood maybe than kids that grow up inland somewhere that don't have those kinds of things. So I guess just having grown up here, the whole part of it.
Was your school experience like a good experience with teachers and the school?
Of course, at that age back then, I may not have thought so. As when you think back on it though, and I can tell you that as you get older and you look back, you think to yourself, I wish I could go back and do that again and do some things differently.
Yeah.
But again, Old Orchard Beach is a small school system, it was then as well, and you had more opportunities. You may not have been the greatest athlete the school had, but you were still good enough to be able to play because you didn't have the larger number of people to compete against, so you got to do those kinds of things. But I can't, growing up in Old Orchard Beach and going to school here, I wouldn't change anything.
So we were just talking, but did you go through the OOB school system?
Yes. What do I remember? How much I was hoping it was over, we could get it over with and graduate. That was number one, probably on my priority list back in those days. But again, I think just having the opportunity to be involved in a lot of the activities in school and all your friends and all those things that you experience as you go through life and you're young and you see things so differently. And again, Orchard Beach being a little bit unique, I think the whole experience is something that, you know, you look back on and you realize how much you really wish you could do that again. Not so much even to be younger, just that it was such a good time and the responsibilities that you had, you were so different from that of an adult, and you don't realize it at the time, but it's really a good time in your life, and you should really strive to enjoy every second of it. 1969.
What did you do so long?
After that,
Yeah.
I went to school for a while at SMTC. I didn't graduate from there. I left that to take a job in town here, working for a place called Briggs Garage. It used to be a gas station here in town that had oil burner service and all those kinds of things that went with that. And I went back to school for a short time to learn how to repair furnaces and boilers and those types of things. And then I met a guy that I was working with who happened to know the police chief in town, and he asked me one day if I'd be interested in being a reserve police officer. They called them specials at the time. And I had never thought about it, it never crossed my mind, and I said, yeah, why not? And that was in 1971, and I got hired as a special in the summer of 1972, in June of 1972, and I've been here ever since.
What was your first job in OOB?
My first job was working at a store called Jimmy's Market on Washington Avenue that's no longer there, sorting bottles. Back in those days, they used to have to sort all the bottles out, put them in boxes for each business or each manufacturer of the drink. And I did that when I was 10 years old, and that was my first job. I lived right next door to the guy that owned it, a guy named Jimmy Witsatzis, and grew up next door to him, so I always had a job working for him during the summer months or even in the winter. So that was my first job, and I got $5 a week.
So, the next question was, how much did you get paid at your job?
For that job, I got $5 a week, and that was a lot of money back in 1960. Well, during the summer, I worked for Jimmy's Market all through high school, after school, putting up stock and doing those kinds of things. And then when I got into high school, in the summer months, I worked at Palace Playland, running the rides down there. Jimmy Witsatzis had another store in Ocean Park that I used to work at during the summer months, making sandwiches and putting up stock and working the cash register and all those things. And then I worked, like I said, I worked at the Palace Playland. I worked at a place called Vance Cafe, which was a restaurant down where the public comfort stations are in downtown. There was a restaurant next door to it that burned, but I used to work there washing dishes. I worked in a bakery for a while down there. I worked at the IGA. There was an IGA on Heath Street that's now gone. Let's see, where else did I work? I think that was it.
Did you live in OOB during World War II?
No.
And
Well, I've been involved in a lot of history with Old Orchard Beach because I've been doing this job so long. So whenever there was an event that took place that was, I guess, history making, I was certainly there.
like the Memorial Day parades?
Those, yeah, a lot of that. Events that took place, like when the pier fell down in the storm in 1972, I believe it was, or 3. A lot of fires that took place, you know, and as a police officer, a lot of the things, crimes that took place, homicides that we've had, different events like that, you know, from my memory anyway, most people obviously don't know the details of those, but there were a lot of events that I think are a part of the history of this town that I've been fortunate in some ways to witness, and then it's kind of unfortunate in others.
What are some things in OOB that drastically changed throughout your time living here? And have you been affected by it in any way?
I think I've been affected by it just by the nature of the job that I have in a lot of ways.
How did it make you feel?
Well, there's a lot, sometimes sadness, depending on what it was. Like when we've had, like when the historic buildings are burned, or some type of crime that impacted the community in a negative way, or those types of things. There's a lot of good things, and then sadly there are some things that make you sad.
Yeah. And has it affected you in any way? How did it
Well, I
make
think
you feel?
partially just spoke about that, but for example, when there was a storm, I believe it was in 1972, and, no, I'm sorry, it was 1978. It was a big winter storm, and that's the year that the pier fell down for the last time. And I was right there on the beach and watched that happen and saw it crash into the ocean. And there are also a lot of houses in Ocean Park down by the creek. Do you know where that is? There was some houses that sat there that the surf took, and they floated off. So, that affects you in a bad way. You feel badly for the people that lost their property. And just after that, the town planted dune grass. And it took a few years to grow, but that stopped all of that erosion problem, so that hasn't happened again since. And the pier was never rebuilt to the length that it was, so that stayed pretty stable. So, well, yes, I grew up here. I love this community. It's been good to me. It's provided me with a living my entire adult life for the most part, and so I'm very grateful for what the town has given me, the opportunities that I've had. I've always, since 1960, lived here, and it's, again, a great community, and I like living here, and I have no plans to go anywhere else.
So back to the job situation, what do you do for work now?
I am the chief of police.
What was one of your favorite things to do in OLB? Or do you still have a favorite thing to do in OLB now?
Well, when I was younger, one of my favorite things to do, as I mentioned earlier, was I got into surfing at like 13 years old, and did that right up until probably 20 years ago. And that was one of my favorite things. Playing sports was another one, basketball, baseball, those kinds of things. I played basketball right up until about 7 years ago on Sunday nights with a bunch of my friends for 30 years. So those types of things, golf, that kind of thing.
What was your favorite place to hang out? Why? And is it still here?
Well, as a child, downtown, obviously. I had spent every nickel and dime I had, and they were nickel and dime at the time, pinball machines. I spent every nickel I had there. And just being down there in that environment, and yes, some of it's still there. It's a lot different. It's not anything like it was when I was young, but that was probably one of my favorite places to be.
Noah's Ark.
What?
Remember Noah's Ark?
Oh yeah, I saw that. I watched that all burn. I was there. I was working at Palace Playland, right across the street, running a ride, and I was right there when it all happened. Yeah.
Were there any big landmarks that people may not know about today that you would share?
Well, as Helene just said, the left-hand side, the pier side of Orchard Street was another amusement park, and that had I don't know what you call it. It wasn't a haunted house, but it was called Noah's Ark. It was like a ship, and it was way up high, and it was dark, and you go through it, and then there was another big thing. It was a slide. And those were sort of landmarks. The pier was certainly a landmark, and always has been. A lot of old hotels, big hotels that were either torn down and converted into condos or burned down. On Old Orchard Street, there were a lot of hotels and big buildings that no longer exist that were, again, torn down and burned down. There were, back in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of fires in downtown. It took a lot of the old hotels and things that were there since the 1800s. So other than that, I can't think of any other landmarks that I was aware of anyway.
Were you there? Were you part of any of the fires around like OLB?
Yes. Back in the mid-70s to about 1980, I was also a common on the fire department, so I was there for a lot of those fires, plus being a police officer, I was there as well. So yeah, I was there for a lot of those.
Do you know how some of them started?
A lot of them were caused by arson.
What's that?
Somebody said it.
Oh.
Some of them were accidental, lightning or some malfunction with the electricity or something like that. But the majority of them were typically arson fires.
It looked like when you were growing up.
Well, it was a lot longer than it is right now. At the very end, there was I think they called it a casino. It was a big building that had been used for many different things over the years. When I was young, it was an aquarium. There was an arcade in there at one time. It used to be I believe it was a place where bands played. I think years ago there was one even further out, but that one that was there when I was young wasn't used for bands that I can recall back in the 60s.
Yeah.
They had another place on West Grand Avenue called the Palace Ballroom. That was another venue for bands, and back in those days, some of the 1960s groups like the Beach Boys and people like that came to that particular place.
One more thing. I don't know if you know, so if you go down the strip and then take a left,
Yeah.
do you know where the Barefoot Boy is?
Yeah.
Have you heard of that? The Beach Boys played there.
Did they?
That was my grandfather's restaurant, and then we sold it. But the crazy thing is, one of the Beach Boys played there, and he tripped on a chair and bashed his jaw off the table.
Really? When was that?
Long time ago. I don't think I was alive.
Long before you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, sure.
Do you miss being a kid?
Yes. I get accused of being childish on occasion, but yes, I miss it very much. Like I said, when you get older and you start looking back at your life and you think of how it is now compared to what you had when you were young, being young is great compared to getting older. It's, I think anybody would tell you that they would be more than happy to go back and do it all over again.
Did you ever go to any of the concerts at the ballpark or at the pier?
Yes, I was a police officer at the time the concerts were at the ballpark, and I attended most of those as a police officer, dealing with the crowds and that type of thing. The pier now, that was before my time.
Were you here when the famous big bands played?
No.
Did you ever see any of the horse races at the kite track?
That was before me as well.
Have you seen the Dummy Railroad?
No, I've seen
Did you
remnants of
ever
it
ride it?
when I was younger. No, I didn't. It wasn't there when I was young, but I remember in Ocean Park seeing Prospect going across the creek. Some of the pilings were still there and those types of things, but the rest of it was gone by then. I've heard a lot about it, seen pictures of it, but I never had a chance to ride it.
Or planes landed?
Which year? There was, if you're talking about back with Lindbergh and those types of things, no.
When the big hangar was on?
Oh, no,
beach?
that was way before my time, but back in 1980 maybe, before that, in the 70s, there was what they called a fly-in on the beach, and they had airplanes similar to, there was actually a replica of Lindbergh's plane that landed on the beach that day, and we had to guard the planes because they stayed overnight, because it got foggy and they couldn't leave, so they had to stay overnight, so we guarded them. There were probably 30, 40 planes that landed and spent the night there. I was there for that, but I wasn't there for the hangars. I missed that.
Or how did you spend your birthday in Old Bay?
Like any other day. There was nothing special
Going
about
down
it.
to the beach,
Just go to the beach
hanging
and
out.
whatever, yes.
Did you ever go to any of the dances in the ballroom?
No. The restaurants? Well, the one I worked in, Vance Cafe, was a full-service restaurant where you went in and sat down. And back in those days, a lot more Canadian people came than do now. And I used to have to work until 1 o'clock in the morning in there because they served full meals right up until 11, 12 o'clock at night, which doesn't happen anywhere anymore. So the restaurants were more of a sit-down full meal as opposed to what it's like now with takeout and that type of thing. Like Joseph's by the Sea, I don't know if you know where that is, that type of restaurant was pretty typical, maybe not quite as
Yeah.
upscale as that one is, but, it was all full-service meals with, you know, all day long.
Want to do that you wasn't able to do.
That I wasn't able to do
Yeah.
in Old Orchard
Yes.
itself? I don't know, I've been lucky. I've been able to do a lot of things because of the position I have here and be involved in a lot of things with different groups of people and organizations and those types of things. If that's what you mean, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that, but, I've been given a lot of opportunities in this community and.
I guess you could do anything.
If I could do anything?
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that I haven't done that I would like to do. Again, I've probably done more than most people just because of the job that I have.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit difficult to answer. I can't think of anything that, you know, I even was acting town manager for a few times, and I wouldn't want to do that on a full-time basis, but other than that, I can't think of anything.
Is being a police your dream job?
Dream job? Well, no, I didn't have a dream job when I was young. I was just doing whatever. And I got lucky and sort of fell into this and then found that in the end, it would be my dream job. I didn't, like I said, I didn't have one originally.
It was suitable for you?
Was it what?
It was suitable for you?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I loved it right away. I couldn't get enough of it. And I still feel that way. It's been a great job, and you have a lot of opportunities to do a lot of things for a lot of people, and that's the part of it that I really do enjoy, being able to do something for someone that they really appreciate, and they tell you that they appreciate it. It makes you feel good, and it makes you realize that you can do things that, you know, make a difference for people, and that's probably the most important thing about what I do, is being able to make that difference. And I think I've been pretty fortunate.